Hello everyone, and I hope you're all doing very well. Today we're looking at mast bumping in the Huey. This is essentially where the rotor, for just some reason, just flies off the Huey and then you plummet to a fiery death. And if you're a Huey pilot like me, or especially if you're not a very good Huey pilot like me, it is incredibly frustrating. Again, like the other typical problem with the Huey, your engine overheating and burning out, once you understand why it does it and how to avoid it, all of a sudden the problem just disappears and everything's great. So first we're going to look at the theory, and rather than me trying to explain the theory, I'm just going to show a real US public video from, I guess, the 60s or the 70s. That'll last about 10 minutes, and then we're going to go and actually do the examples in DCS and show how to help it as best we can.
In the Huey and Cobra, inappropriate pilot response to low-G maneuvers or mechanical failure can lead to mast bumping and possible in-flight separation. As an Army helicopter pilot, you must understand the operational characteristics of the UH-1 and AH-1 and know how to handle these aircraft to avoid mast bumping. To help you understand why mast bumping occurs and what you can do to avoid it, we'll first review some of the basics of the rotor and the control systems and the aerodynamics that lead to mast bumping. We'll then discuss these factors in terms of operational flight maneuvers and describe what you, as a pilot, must do to prevent the onset of mast bumping. First, mast bumping is the result of excessive rotor flapping. Flapping is the characteristic of a rotor blade to move up and down during rotation. Flapping is common to all helicopter rotor systems and is normal and expected. The rotors of the UH-1 and AH-1 use a seesaw action about a hinge pin to accommodate flapping. To prevent the blades from contacting the tail boom or other structure during normal starts and stops, the interior of the hub is fitted with static stops. These are contoured to limit the amount of blade flap, and sufficient clearance is provided between hub and static stops for all normal maneuvers. On the UH-1, the maximum flapping angle is just over 11.5 degrees. On the AH-1, it's 12.5 degrees. If flapping exceeds these values, the stops will bump the mast. It is the violent contact between the static stops and the mast during flight that causes mast separation, and this you must avoid at all costs. A turning rotor has a constant flapping pattern. Maximum flapping up will always be opposed by maximum flapping down, 180 degrees later. At normal operating speeds, the individual blades blur into a disc shape. When this rotor disc is not at a right angle to the mast, flapping is occurring. Now let's examine how flapping can occur as a result of pilot control inputs. The cyclic control stick transmits inputs through the swash plate, changing blade pitch. The rotor disc will flap in the direction the stick is moved. So, cyclic stick movement produces rotor flap. The pilot controls the position of the rotor disc. In flight, when the rotor disc tilts, the aircraft responds by moving in the same direction. In this way, the pilot controls the helicopter. Mast bumping is directly related to how much you, as a pilot, allow the blade system to flap. And to understand this better, we have to dig a little deeper. In straight and level flight, blade flapping is minimal and difficult to see in real time, or even, for that matter, in slow motion. Flapping angles of less than 2 degrees are expected under usual flight conditions. You can expect flapping angles to increase by 1 or 2 degrees with high forward speeds, at low rotor RPM, at high density altitudes, or at high gross weights. You can also expect increased flapping angles during turbulence. Aircraft maneuvering can also induce large flapping angles. For example, side slips and low speed flight at extreme CG positions. The risk of excessive flapping and possible mast bumping increases when you allow the aircraft to approach low G conditions. And that's what we really want to talk about. Let's see what happens when a pilot encounters a ridge line or a tree line, executes a cyclic climb, and then noses over using abrupt forward cycling. In this maneuver, He has deliberately given up G loading on the rotor disc by changing rapidly from upward to downward flight and is approaching 0 G. Higher speeds aggravate the situation. The combination of down collective and low G means that lift, and therefore thrust, has essentially disappeared. Let's look at the situation from aft along the roll axis. Absence of thrust means there is no lateral cyclic control, so cyclic movement cannot change fuselage position. The aircraft does not respond because the pilot has given up G loading on the rotor disc. The thrust of the tail rotor, acting above the helicopter's center of gravity, starts the fuselage rolling to the right. Seeing this, the pilot was alarmed by the excessive roll rate. The pilot abruptly applies left cyclic. The rotor disc tilts in the direction commanded by the pilot. The pilot still has rotor control, but he is controlling an unloaded rotor. That is, a rotor that is not producing thrust. Although he still has fore and aft control, he has lost roll control of the helicopter. Flapping increases drastically. The rotor hub strikes the mast violently. On one side, then the other, and the mast may separate. Let's go back to the point where the roll started to see what the pilot should have done. As we saw before, as the aircraft rolled, lateral cyclic inputs could not develop thrust because there was no change in angle of attack of the rotor system with respect to the relative wind. Consequently, there was no positive lateral cyclic control. In contrast, let's look at the situation in the pitch axis. Similar to the roll case, aft cyclic inputs cause the rotor disc to move. But in this case, the disc movement changes the disc angle of attack. Aft cyclic realigns the rotor and thrust is restored. The nose pitches up. And with thrust once again available, the pilot is able to counteract the roll. Let's make sure we all understand what the pilot should have done during the nose-over maneuver. He could have avoided the low G condition by using more gradual forward cyclic. The rate and extent of cyclic motion should be adjusted to keep the rotor loaded at all times. As a pilot, you clearly minimize the likelihood of mast bumping by staying above 1/2 G at all times, thereby preventing approach to low G and the right roll tendency. If the rotor becomes unloaded during low G, it is absolutely essential to recover thrust first by smoothly moving the cyclic stick aft. Once thrust is restored, left cyclic will then return the aircraft to the normal flight attitude. The basic lesson here is that the pilot contributes to the potential of mast bumping in the low G environment, because any pilot's instinctive reaction when a roll begins is to correct it with lateral cyclic. And the greater the roll rate, the more abrupt the control movement is likely to be. Severe flight attitudes seem to call for severe control inputs. Yet it's the severity of these inputs that can produce worse problems. If you encounter low G conditions, remember, avoid abrupt, large magnitude control inputs. Smooth, gradual control movements are essential. First, aft cyclic to restore the thrust. Then and only then, left cyclic to correct for right roll. You may also encounter low G conditions during mask, unmasking maneuvers or steep descending nose-low turns. If these maneuvers are performed with abrupt, uncoordinated, or cross-control inputs, the rapid changes from upward to downward flight may unload the rotor and induce mast bumping. The risk of mast bumping also increases in turbulence when sudden upward and downward drafts can unload the rotor and get you into low G conditions. If that should happen, you must resist the instinctive urge to counteract unusual aircraft attitudes with hard lateral cyclic and pedal inputs. You must first reload the rotor by moving the cyclic stick aft. Then, once normal G conditions have been reestablished, normal control will return.
So now we're going to put it into DCS, and we found there are various ways to achieve rotor separation, mast bumping in DCS with the Huey. In fact, at this point, what we can say is we've tried it in the other helicopters. We cannot get mast bumping in the other helicopters in DCS. We think due to rotor design is just different. So we think it's for the Huey only. And we've narrowed it down to two main ways in which we can achieve mast bumping in DCS, and these are the most likely ways that you're going to see it. So these are things that we need to avoid. The first way is exactly as it said in the video. If you're going up a hill and then you suddenly nose over and you get into a 0 or near 0G configuration, at which point if you try and introduce harsh cyclic, then that's one way to do the mast bumping. Now the other way we found that might even be more common way of doing it is if landing and taking it off on a slope of kind of 12 degrees plus. Really, Hello? Really? I know it's a mast bumping video, but Jesus Christ.
Not even intentional.
Well, that just shows that you can do it even on a flat, but you've really got to, you've really got to be an idiot to do that. So what we're looking at is the ways that, in daily flight, you can do this really easily by accident. So, sorry, the second way, before we rudely interrupted, was landing on a hill and just normal takeoff and landing on that hill. Very dangerous. So what we're going to do is we're going to do that first. Alo's going to lead us off to a hill. We're going to land on the side of it. I'm going to show you the dangers of the hill, and then we'll come back and do the zero gravity thing. I love these videos because it gives us an excuse to fly the hell out of some helicopters, which we rarely get to do.
I do like flying the Huey.
Are you with us, Soames?
I am, right behind you.
Well done. One thing about doing all these videos, including the best one for me was the turbine heat video. It's such a better Huey pilot now I've learnt things like this.
Yeah.
It's becoming almost difficult to do something wrong. Well, you watch. I'll burn the turbine out now, and it just makes you a much more enjoyable thing to do in DCS once you learn the little foibles of the various choppers, and they all have different foibles, different design weaknesses and stuff. Right, you've got to concentrate, Hello, and go and do your landing. I'm going to look for a landing myself. Over there will do. So we've got a hill here. It's about, I don't know, 15 degrees or something like that. It's not insurmountable for a Huey, so it's something that's relatively typical. We're going to land on it relatively sideways. Right, I just need to concentrate now, so I won't be able to talk for a minute. So that's just how Supercat's brain works. Apologise if I'm going to land on anyone. Avoid VRS, avoid Alo. And landing. Oh, that was tipping over. Oh, tipped. I actually got separation with the. I actually got mast bump. It blew off before I hit the ground. I just tipped over.
I got separation on landing.
Okay. Now we didn't actually. We both got mast bump there, but before we actually meant to show it to you. So what we're going to do is going to go over again and try and do that a little more controlled, so we can actually, show you doing it on purpose. We'll be over in a mic, Soames.
Okay.
It's typical, you can't do it when we're practicing, but the minute you're recording.
Yes, that is life, I'm afraid. A lot of the new guys that have just joined the squadron now are realising how much more difficult it is to fly once the camera's on.
Yeah.
You can fly perfectly well, like all the guys on the internet, the YouTube comments, oh, you're crap, I can fly better than that. I'm sure you can, but wait until the camera's on you.
Yeah, I just lost my rotor that time.
Yeah, it's well, we're at the point now where it's we're actually trying not to do it yet, and we're still getting mast separation. We'll explain why this is in a minute. Or Alo will. First, I'll just want to get to a controlled position where I can control when the rotor comes off. So just going to try that again. And it's all about side cyclic again. Side cyclic is the problem.
Full left.
Yeah, it's full left for me as well. Yeah. Right. So what we're going to do is land without full left cyclic, which is easy.
Yeah, you kind of just have to drop it.
Yeah, I kind of tipped over last time though, so let's try.
Or land nose first, but then rotate on the...
Yeah, that might be a good idea. But we did it fine last time, it's awfully frustrating. Why won't this helicopter stop? Right. Concentrate, Cap, don't fall over. Mast bump. Oh, the stress. Is that you, Soames?
It is, yeah.
Right, more under control this time. Look how much left cyclic I'm having to maintain. Don't fall off, don't fall off, don't bump, don't bump, don't bump, don't bump, don't bump, don't bump. Don't bump. Everything's okay. No. Taking off. God, this is hard. Right, I'm just gonna land forward. I'm gonna land forward because I just can't seem to do it anymore. And then I'm gonna turn like a little cheater. Not very British, I know, but he's doing.
I quite like the side landings is actually coming in the way Soames is coming in, and then do a 180 towards the mountain to drop airspeed.
I don't care anymore, I'm just cheating. Don't tip backwards! Oh, you little... So we've chosen a pretty steep hill here. It doesn't have to be this steep, so just bear that in mind. Right, finally here, Aloe. Jesus, that was hard. So, we've already shown you that it'll mast bump just by trying to land on a hill like this. But what we're going to show now is a kind of typical takeoff. What I'm going to do is... my first natural instinct of taking off this hill is left cyclic full. Because even with left cyclic full, as I'm starting to take off, she will slide down the hill. And that's what we'll just get. I'll start to add collective. Now, when I'm adding collective, then we're generating thrust or load through the rotors, and that's fine. And we will be able to take off probably okay like that. But if we come off the collective at some point again, and I'll do that on purpose, we'll unload the rotor and it'll spin freely with full collective on, and we'll almost certainly get a mast bump. So what I'm going to do is try that first. So I'm going to go collective full, which is perfectly natural. I'm going to, cyclic full left, collective on and off, and we now have no rotor. And that's how easy it is. And that wasn't an extreme movement at all. Even with full left cyclic, oh, it's going to hit you. Even with full left cyclic, it still felt that I wanted to pull more to the left. So if you're going to try that out yourself, that is the thing. We're going to get a nice close-up of Aloe now. Stand by, I'll set the camera up. Again, this is a really annoying thing. It's the kind of thing that when you want it to happen, it doesn't happen. But if you don't want it to happen, this will just happen every friggin' time. Okay, Aloe, I've got the camera in position. When you're ready, if you wouldn't mind bumping the shit out of that mast.
Go for it.
Oh, there you go. We got mast bump. That was I didn't have much metal fatigue in it on that mast, and that is that. And like I said, if you're flying the Huey and you're like me, and Soames has lost his mast, excellent. Then I've got to get a photo of these guys all in a row with no mast, with no rotor. Okay, boys, that's a great idea, a great example there of how to lose your mast when trying to take off or land, especially on landing, mainly on landing, but take off as well. On the side of a hill. Next, let's get back and show the kind of over-the-top weightlessness thing that they did in the video. Okay, so this time what we're going to do is what they said in the video. We're not going to bother going out to the hill because it requires effort. We're going to just pretend there is a hill in the middle of this runway. We're going to take a run up. We're going to come back. When we're at 100 knots or so, the faster we are, it just makes it a little bit easier. We're going to climb up an imaginary hill. Once we're at the top of that imaginary hill, we're going to pretend we want to go back down the other side. So to do that, we're going to go stick forward, cyclic forward, and we're going to come off to a certain extent the collective because we don't want to climb anymore, obviously. And that is going to make the problem worse. What that's going to do is the lowering of the G on the aircraft is going to unload the rotors. We have less thrust through the rotors. Also, the lowering of the collective is going to lower the load of the rotors, so that will compound the problem. And we're going to put the side cyclic in there at the same time, and we're going to see we're going to get a severage of the mast. And this doesn't have to be a hill. You could be, for instance, doing a pop-up attack, coming into a base and popping up to attack over some trees and diving down to guns, and on that dive down is when you'll lose your rotors. Really easy to do when you don't want it to happen. So when you're ready, Aloe, take off and we'll follow you.
From.
Yeah, you watch it not work now.
Yep.
So we're just going out to sea just to get 100 knots plus in the bird. Yeah, so it's something you've got to be really careful about when doing any kind of pop-up type attack.
Yeah, the key telltale signs is that weightlessness.
Yeah, it's that weightlessness that's doing it, and we're having to force the weightlessness by doing the forward cyclic stick.
So there's a maneuver known as the pushover, which is for pop-up attacks where you come up and push the tail over the top, which is when it most commonly.
we're thinking that this is only for aircraft with this rotor design. This and the Cobra and, well, whatever else has got this rotor design. Up and down, 100 knots. Whoops. Alright, when you're ready, sir.
Very firm.
Hey, one rotor off. Cap is Oscar Mike. Oh, we've got a separation, boys. We've got separation. Soames, when you're ready.
No separation.
No, Soames can't quite get the separation, boys. Can't get that negative G in it. Never mind. Keep
Smooth.
you are indeed too silky smooth. Right, boys. So that shows what we would consider the two most likely ways of doing it. So to reiterate, landing on a side of a mountain or a hill, just don't. To be honest, just don't do it sideways. As long as you don't do it sideways, you're okay. Doing it forwards, you're okay. Doing it backwards, well, a bit weird, but you're probably okay. Doing it sideways, you're going to lose your rotor every time, as we saw there. You know, absolute nightmare. And any kind of pop-up attack, especially where we're going fast, and the reason, the faster we go, the easier we can get into zero gravity or near zero gravity. Is going to have this unloading of the rotors, and especially with the harsh cycling left or right, you're going to mast bump there and do that. So that's that. Anything you want to add to mast bumping in the Huey in DCS, boys?
Nothing from me. Been very interesting though.
Avoid it at all costs.
Avoid it at all costs. Yeah. Now there are kind of not the same but similar effects in the. You got a problem in the KF50 where you get the rotors slapping into each other. You got a problem in the MI8 where you chop your tail off. I think we'll look at those another times. But that's it for the Huey. All right. I hope that you enjoyed that, and see you later.